Okay, Crash Game ranking. I do have the list of like how I rank them that I've been sitting on for like months, um, and really just do not have the time or patience to make it like an actual video of it. So I'll just do this, um, and basically just kind of like freeball my thoughts on it. I'm gonna turn the music down a little bit, or I'll just turn my. That's better. Alright, so I think this came out to exactly 20 games. Yeah, because let's see, that's 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's 21, but it has CNK GBA and CNK as two separate things, and I'm just going to treat them as the same thing because they're pretty similar. I did decide that I will rank like the handheld versions of like the Titans games and everything, because even though I haven't played a lot of them, I think I've played enough to get like a basic idea of how it is, of how each of them are. I'm not gonna do any of the mobile games, so none of like the iPhone games. So no Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D, no Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 2, or any of that. I've only played Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 2. You can't even download it anymore. I'm pretty sure none of them are on like any app stores at all, so you have to like go through like a bunch of hoops to actually get to them. My verdict on Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 2 from my memory of, like fucking 8 years ago is that it's okay. Like, as far as mobile games go, it's not the worst one I've ever played, but it's also not particularly impressive. So yeah. Alright, I guess we'll start from the bottom. So yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna set this to loop. That way if I take more than 30 minutes, it won't just become quiet. Alright, so bottom. The worst Crash game that I've ever played. Where is it? You are here somewhere. There you are. Motherfucking Crash Boom Bang. If you want me to be completely honest, I don't have a single nice thing to say about this game. Like, I really don't. I played this game once and stomached it for about 30 minutes. And it's actually one of the worst games I've ever played. Like, it's a really, really shitty Mario Kart. Or Mario Party. It's probably also a shitty Mario Kart. But really, like, there's, like, almost nothing redeeming about this game. Like, all the minigames are really boring. The board game setup and the goal of, like, each board, like, I honestly didn't understand. I didn't understand what the goal was at all. All the character designs are terrible because they use like the Japanese designs, which in itself is not bad, but then everything's cel shaded, so it just looks super shitty. As far as plot goes, you should never play a Crash Bandicoot game for the plot, but even for like this series, Crash Boom Bang's plot is fucking stupid. And like, I don't know, the Viscount is not a very interesting character. No character in this game is interesting. None of the minigames are interesting. That was like the most bored 30 minutes of my life. To the point that after I finished playing this, I declared it the worst game I've ever played. And it's probably still in my bottom 3. So, yeah, Crash Boom Bang is terrible. Also, the music is god-awful. Like, there isn't a single good song in this game. In fact, the title theme is fucking obnoxious. So, yeah. So yeah, fuck Crash Boom Bang. That game's terrible. Alright, so next I'm going to like talk about these together because I have very little experience with both of them, but they both kind of have the same vibe, and that's Mom DS and Titans GBA. I've only played probably like roughly like 15 to 30 minutes of each of these, but they kind of just suffer from the same problems. They're really buggy. They don't function all that well. They're really poorly balanced. Like, I'm sure in one of them the Titans are overpowered, and in the other one the Titans are completely useless. Like, they're really shitty side-scrollers. Not only in an era where side-scrollers were starting to fall out of favor, because we were in the era of, like, the DS and 3D platformers on handheld were completely possible. Which I guess, like, Titans GBA has an excuse. Mom DS has no excuse on that. Like, I don't know. I don't really have a lot of experience with these games, but, like, from the little bit I played, I did understand that they were really, really terrible. I do know there are a lot of people who put Mom DS below Crash Boom Bang, and I think if maybe I had finished Mom DS, I would have felt the same way. But at the same time, I didn't finish Crash Boom Bang either. And, like... So the biggest problem I have with Titans, GBA, and Mom DS is that one of their biggest core issues is that they're really buggy. Like, a lot of the times they just don't function properly, which in and of itself is already really bad. But the problem with Crash Boom Bang is that it is so utterly terrible, but it does function properly. Crash Boom Bang, as far as I can tell, does everything it's supposed to do, and it's still trash, which is why I still think Crash Boom Bang is worse than both of these. I mean, you can honestly like rank these interchangeably. They're both pretty bad for similar reasons. I would put Mom DS a little lower just because, if anything, it's on the DS, so it has even less of an excuse to be bad. Like Titans GBA, at least it's on the GBA, which is a worse console, like performance-wise. But they're both shit. Like these are the only 3 Crash games that I think are truly bad. So yeah. And going on from that, that's the bad tier. So let's go into mediocre. Alright, so again, I'm gonna rank these 2 together. And this is like, I don't know, it's hard to rank these. Because like it depends on like how you view things. But the next 2 are going to be Mind Over Mutant and wherever it just went, Crash of the Titans. These are the console versions, so like PlayStation 2, Wii, Xbox 360, all that. So like, I don't think that these are bad games. Like, in a vacuum, when you don't relate them to the Crash series, I honestly think they're kind of alright. Especially like Titans. Like... as a whole, they're really not bad. But the problem is that when you relate them to the Crash series, is that, like, they really aren't Crash Bandicoot in anything aside from name and, like, some of the traits of the characters. And, like, even then, by this point, a lot of the characters were, like, nothing like they originally were. Yeah, basically that's what I'm saying, Sensi. If these were standalone games, like if they were not tied to Crash Bandicoot, I think they would be like considered decent games. The problem is that when you look at them in the lens of how do they rank to the rest of the Crash series, I feel like I have to put them this low because they took Crash in a direction that really nobody wanted it to go, or at least not most of the community or like people who are fans of the series did not want it to go. Like, I don't know. Like, I enjoy Crash of the Titans. Like, the last time I played it, I had fun with it. It got a little stale at the end, which is why, like, I would only say they're decent games. But really, they're not good Crash games, and that's the biggest problem. And for clarification with this list, this is, like, my opinion on how I, like, view them as, like, favorites. I'm not saying, like, this is objectively the best, this is objectively the worst, and, like, if you disagree with me, you're wrong. This is a lot based on my own perception and enjoyment of it, and when I compare them to other Crash games, I definitely enjoy them less. So even if they might be, like, objectively better games than some of the other games on this list, like, I just don't think they work well as Crash games. As to, like, which one I consider better than the other, Titans and Mind Over Mutant, in my eyes, are really, really close. I think that for everything that one of them does right, it does something else wrong, and they kind of just, like, bounce out on, like, doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing. Titans, I think, has a much better, like, difficulty overall. It gets kind of bullshit at the end, where things just become overly obnoxious, but Mind Over Mutant's too easy. I appreciate Mind Over Mutant's attempt to be open world, even though it completely botched it up, but I think I would take that over Titans being incredibly linear, level to level, and all the levels are really fucking long. So I think in that regard, I appreciated Mind Over Mutant being a bit more open, even if there was relentless backtracking, and also Mind Over Mutant's pretty short. I think Mind Over Mutant's humor is overall a lot better. Like, there's legitimate points in Mind Over Mutant where I do actually laugh. The game is pretty funny in a lot of spots. It's like not as funny as something like, you know, like Twin Sanity or anything, but it is. I think it hit the humor a lot better, where a lot of the dialogue and humor in Titans is really cringy. Like, it tried to take itself too seriously, but it also tried to be funny, and that is just kind of it's kind of awful to listen to if you go back and play Titans. I would very slightly give this to Titans, but they're almost like exactly right next to each other. So yeah, that's all I really have to say on the Mutant games. So next on this, I don't know whether this is going to be a hot take or everybody's going to agree with me. I feel like this is probably the single most contentious game in the entire Crash franchise. You have people who love this game, and then you have people who hate this game. And I definitely used to hate this game, but now, like, the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, it's almost good. And that's Crash Tag Team Racing. So I used to rank this as my second least favorite Crash game, but that was before I added these two to the list, and it was before I like seriously analyzed the Titans games. But like I said with Tag Team Racing, the game is almost good. Like the platforming and the sandbox elements that kind of like it has like a GTA inspiration, I want to say, where you run around the amusement park and you get missions from people, you do whatever. That was a really cool idea. I really liked that. I think that's a direction that I could have seen Crash going and been in support of. It's a really cool concept. And then you put the racing in it. And the racing is so fucking terrible. It's like, it's the most dry, bare bones, skillless racing I've ever seen. There's like no real mechanics to it. You just drive, you clash onto someone, you let them do all the driving, and then at the very end you detach off them, you win the race. Like, there's nothing to the racing in this game. And the title is extremely misleading because the racing's only one part of it. Like, really, I think that the platforming and the sandbox elements are more prominent than the racing is, which is why I probably don't entirely hate this game. Like, but I can't really rate it higher because even though the racing is not the only focus of the game, it's a very prominent element of it. And it's like, it's one of those things where that one bad part of it significantly drags it down. Like, I think if the racing just wasn't there, I would probably rate this game a lot higher, but that alone just, it's so hard to like, it's just so hard to enjoy the game when there's so much of it that's just completely bland and dull. Seems like the racing was a bit of an afterthought. I don't even think it was. I'm pretty sure the racing and like the clash mechanic was one of the first things they thought of. It was just executed so poorly, and then all of the stuff they built around it was so much better. Another issue I have with this game is that every character's personality is like completely different from how they normally are, with the exception of like Cortex is like pretty similar to how he actually is. But like Crash is a fucking bully and it's annoying. Coco's a brat. Crunch is basically Mr. T. Engine is a deranged lunatic, more so than he already was. Like, Nina's the one character whose like personality change I kind of liked because it gave her a personality. And I kind of liked the idea of her just being completely psychotic. So like that's the one character change I did like, was the change they made to Nina. But other than that, like, a lot of ways this game is like, this was kind of the precursor to like the Titans games, where it kind of became Crash in name only, which makes sense because all three of these games were made by the same company. Tiny's not in Tag Team Racing. That's the crazy thing. Also, Tiny in Crash of the Titans is the worst thing ever. So yeah. But yeah, like, Crash Tag Team Racing is definitely a game that's almost good, but there's just that one element that drags it this far down. Alright, so last game in mediocre tier. I don't even know why I'm hesitating on this. I do not hide my disdain for this game. It's Crash Bash. Like, this game's really not that good, guys. It really isn't. I will acknowledge this game is a lot better when you play it with multiple people. Like, the multiplayer elements of it, especially when you actually manage to get like 4 people together, which I've done in AGDQ, this game can be fun. I do enjoy my time with this game sometimes. The problem is that, especially in the single player elements, this game is beyond horseshit. Like, for one, the minigames get really repetitive because it's a lot of like, it's like, realistically, it's like 5 types of minigames repeated 4 times each, with like some gimmick thrown in every time, and that just kind of gets dull after a while. Full completion of this game is absolutely fucking brutal for like no reason. The AI literally cheats. It's left up to chance a lot of the times, just because like, how much does the AI want to dick you? Like, and it just gets progressively worse as the game continues. the game's really just not fun to play by yourself unless you're doing like some shitty like meme race with friends, like to speed run through it, which we do. It's fun. We all suffer together. But like as an actual single player experience where you play it by yourself, this game really is not that good. Multiplayer is definitely a lot better, but I feel like a game getting carried by its multiplayer is kind of like takes points off of it. Like as a side tangent, I would say like when I rate like Smash games, even if my favorite one to play with other people is either like Brawl or Ultimate, I rate Melee as my favorite because it is the one that I can have a lot of fun playing by myself as well. I guess that's kind of how I view Crash Bash in a similar lens, is that like I can have fun with this game when I'm playing it with other people, but there's nothing fun about this game when I play it by myself. And even like when you play it with other people, it's fun for maybe like 30 minutes to like an hour or two, and then after a while you kind of just get bored and you want to play something else. So yeah, I don't really think highly of Crash Bash, and honestly, I do not want this game to be remade. I would rather people just forget about this game. Like, yeah. But those are the Crash games that I think are mediocre. The rest of these are all right or above. Like, really, like I said, I think these 3 Crash games are the only ones that are truly bad, and then these are the only ones that I have, like, real, like, disdain for. The rest of these, I honestly think are okay or better. So, like, none of the rest of the games are, I would say, are bad. So, the next game is going to be Crash Nitro Kart. And then, like, the GBA version, I would say, is about identical. I've never played the GBA version, but from what I've observed of it, it seems to be basically the same game, just, like, slimmed down so it can be played on, like, a handheld console. So, yeah, Crash Nitro Kart is, like, both versions are right next to each other. As far as kart races go, this is not a terrible one. It introduced zero gravity before like Mario Kart 8 did, which is kind of cool. I think the biggest issue with it is just that like it emulates CTR, which is fine because it's a successor to it. It's kind of like a spiritual sequel, I guess. But it kind of just does it all worse. Like, the cars feel really heavy. The overall physics of the game feels really clunky and heavy to me. The sound design is pretty awful. Like, there's just a bunch of really obnoxious sounds the whole time. Like, your car's engine is just like this the whole time. Like, everything's really loud. The music is mostly forgettable. I mean, the tracks are not, like... The tracks are not terrible, honestly. Like, I think Nitro Fueled proved, if anything, that if you take the CNK tracks and put them in an actual good engine, the tracks are fantastic. But it's kind of just like everything CNK does is like alright. Nothing about it is amazing. Nothing about it is bad. But I don't know. This game is just, to me, has always just been very average. Like, I don't really know how to describe it, I guess. I guess another issue I have is that, like, towards the end of the adventure mode, it kind of feels like the AI starts to cheat, especially Velo. Velo is a dirty, nasty cheater. Like, I think the biggest thing that hurts Nitro Kart is just that it's a very par for the course game. Nothing about it really stands out. It definitely had some good ideas, though. Like, the team frenzy mechanic is good. Some of the new items they added were cool. But ultimately, it's just a watered-down CTR to me. Yeah, like, that's the biggest thing about this, is that it just doesn't stand out. But yeah. It's not bad, though. Like, I want to clarify. Crash Nitro Kart is not bad. It's just not one of my preferred Crash games. Alright. So next. This is definitely a hot take, because I know a lot of people hate this game. Crash Purple. Yeah, I don't hate this game. I don't think it's good. Or at least I don't think it's great. But I do think it gets a little bit too much hate. Like, Crash what? Okay, I guess like if you're in like the Eurasia region, so like if you're in the PAL region, you'll know this game is Crash Fusion. So yeah, Crash Purple / Crash Fusion. Thanks to whoever followed. It's blocked by my screen. But yeah, so this game is pretty much a mini game collection. It pretty poorly uses the idea of a Crash and Spyro crossover. You haven't heard of Crash Purple? Alright, so Crash Purple is like the Crash and Spyro crossover. Its counterpart game is Spyro Orange or Spyro Fusion. There was a lot of potential in this. It was wasted because it's just a bunch of mini games. And like, I don't know. In that regard, it's a lot of wasted potential. You know, Skylar. Quick backtrack. The reason I don't put Mom DS over Boom Bang, I explained this like earlier when I was ranking them, is that one of Mom DS's biggest issues that is a non-functioning game. Crash Boom Bang is a functioning game and it's still terrible, which is why I put it as the worst Crash game, is that it works properly and it's still just that bad. Anyway, back to Crash Purple. Like, it's a mini game collection, so it's a lot of wasted potential. Like, they could have done so much more with the idea of a Crash and Spyro crossover, and they really didn't. But honestly, like, I don't think the mini games are that terrible. Like, there are definitely some that are super dull, but there are some that I legitimately enjoy doing. Like, a lot of the, like, crate bouncing and, like, free fall mini games, the river mini games. Like, I could go in, like, a long list of the mini games that I think are, like, all right. So in that regard, like, I do enjoy this game when I play it. It's just that I also fully acknowledge that there's so much wasted potential with this game. But ultimately, I think the saving grace on Crash Purple is that it's not Spyro Orange. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen any gameplay of Spyro Orange. That game is super fucking trash. Like, they completely revamped the Spyro GBA formula into a side-scroller, which really does not work for Spyro. The mini-games are, like, super bad. 99% of them are auto-scrollers. Like, Crash Purple at least got the better end of that deal. But still, ultimately, this game is only, like, okay. Alright, so the next one, this is again a game I don't have a terribly huge amount of experience in, but from the little bit of it I did play, I did realize that there was a lot in it that was good, and that's Crash of the Titans on DS. Like, it's really surprising that this version ranks higher than the actual main version on consoles, but I think, like, I only played up to, like, the first boss of this just because I was emulating it. And the first boss needed, like, microphone controls or something, and I was not going to set that up on emulator. But I think what this version of the game does over the console version is that it plays a lot closer to classic Crash games than Titans on console does. Like, the combat is still there, but it puts way more emphasis on platforming, and it kind of feels like a classic Crash game in that regard. Again, like, the biggest reason I don't rank this higher is because I really don't have enough experience with it to say whether or not I would prefer it over any of the rest of the games on the list. And I never, like, actually owned it because I had the console version of Titans. But I was legitimately impressed by the little bit of it that I did play. I guess, like, the funny thing is that I'm pretty sure the company that made this is the same company that made this, and that's just tragic. Because this is hot garbage, and this is, like, actually serviceable. If I were to ever revisit this, I could see this going higher, but as it is now, like, yeah, it's better than everything below this, but I can't really compare it to the rest of the games, which I have a lot more experience with. Alright, so the last game in alright tier is Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure, or if you were from Europe, Crash Bandicoot XS. So this was, like, Crash's first handheld outing, and there are some parts of this game that I think are done legitimately well, and there are some parts of this game that I think are done absolutely terribly. My biggest issue with this game is that, especially when you're doing bonus rounds and, like, secret paths, the level design is super garbage. There's a lot of just, like, blind jumps, leaps of faith. You kind of just have to pray you land in the right spot. It's a lot of trial and error, and it's super awful. If you ever tried to fully complete this game, it is mad frustrating just because of all that shit. That aside, though, like, just a normal casual playthrough of this game where you just do any percent, pretty fun. It's definitely not terrible. It is a pretty good, like, GBA Crash experience. It takes inspiration from the PS1 games. It doesn't do anything particularly special on its own, But for its time of release, where, you know, the only other Crash games available to you were the PS1 games and Wrath of Cortex, I think in that regard it was a very nice option for a handheld Crash game. But the issues with the level design are definitely, like, I can't really avoid that. That's the biggest thing that, like, kills my enthusiasm for this game when I revisit it. It's just like, man, fully completing this game sucks. It really does. So, but yeah, it is a very average Crash game. Like, it has decent peaks. Like, when it's fun, it's fun. But when it's not, it's really, really not fun. Honestly, if I had played more Titans DS, I could have seen myself putting this above Huge Adventure. And sometimes I've considered putting this below, like, Purple and Nitro Kart, but I think the thing that saves Huge Adventure is that at least it is extremely faithful to the Crash formula. So if you're looking for, like, a classic Crash game on GBA, you won't entirely go wrong with this. Alright. So that's all the alright Crash games. So now we'll get into the good/great ones. So yeah. Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex. If there is any Crash game that I think really did get vindicated by history, it's this one. I remember when this game came out. Nobody liked this game. Like this game got fucking thrashed, at least in my 6-year-old brain and all the people I talked to. This game was like, there was very few nice words about this game. But, like, as time has gone on, people have realized that, like, as its own thing, like it's not terrible. It is a lesser version. Well, lesser version. It is kind of just like an extension of Crash 3. But I think for what they did, where they took the formula that everybody knew and they expanded on it, I think it does that well. I know that, like, development-wise, this was a result of them... this was a result of the fact that they had to scrap everything. They had plans for, like, an open world Crash, and then they only had a year to develop the game after they changed, like, hands, so Universal gave them a year, and they're like, well, we'll just do the same thing we already knew how to do, because we don't want to screw up the series. Biggest issues with TWAC, there's an extreme overabundance of vehicles, which is, in and of itself, not a problem. But the problem with TWAC is that there's so much of it that there are only if I remember correctly, 6 levels where you don't use any type of vehicle and you play as just Crash. Everything else is either partial vehicle, entirely vehicle, or you play as Coco, who is really just shitty Crash. Like, there's no getting around that. Coco is a worse version of Crash in this game. And, like, they intentionally handicapped her. There's, like, one secret level that is the same level as one that Crash did, except for they had to tune it so that Coco could finish it. Like, that's the problem. But, again, like, abundance of vehicles is not entirely a problem by itself. But then a lot of these vehicles aren't even that good. Like, the ball... Like, the Atmosphere is a really good vehicle. That is actually one of the better additions they made. The problem is that a lot of the level design for, like, later ball levels is really bad. The submarine is god-awful. The mech that you, like, the Crash, like the fucking, like, alien suit or whatever, like the giant robot, that thing's terrible. The buggy is terrible if you're trying to, like, break all the boxes and, like, smoking in the Bandicoot. It's awful. Like... the flying is actually probably better than it is in Crash 3. And then a lot of the other vehicles are just, like, uninteresting, I guess. They're not really bad, but there's nothing really anything special about them. The other issue I have with Wrath of Cortex, aside from loading times, which everybody knows that this game has horrendous loading times on PS2. They're a lot better on Xbox 360 digital, and then I think they're, like, a little better on, like, GameCube. But, like, PS2 loads are awful. Even on greatest hits, it takes, like, 30 seconds, which is bad. I have a lot of issue with this game's level design, this is something I realized when I played it more recently last year, is that because it's on stronger hardware, a lot of the levels are a lot bigger and more expansive. Like, there's more in these levels than there were on the PS1 games. Did I really talk for 30 minutes already? Holy shit. Okay. Here, I'm gonna switch songs actually. I'm feeling Jack 2 Fortress music, so we're gonna listen to this. Yeah, okay, it's looped. So, like, okay, back to like the expansiveness of the consoles. Like, because it's on 6th gen hardware as opposed to 5th gen hardware, the levels are overall a lot bigger. But the problem with that is that this game feels super checkpoint starved, to the point where like you can die and lose so much progress just because there was such a large gap between like one checkpoint and another checkpoint. And I noticed that a lot when I was playing it last year, which is why my opinion of this game is kind of lowered. Also, a lot of like the secret areas, so like death routes and stuff, are just so overabundantly packed with nitros that it's ridiculous. It basically looks like one of those shitty Crash 2 mods where they just like kind of like copy pasted nitros everywhere, except it's an actual video game. So like those are design aspects of the game I have issue with, but like the platforming that it does is honestly pretty good. I just think those negative elements kind of just bring it down. But I still think it's a good Crash game, and I think most people could probably enjoy it. So that's why I have it at the bottom of great. Like it's better than like all of these, but it's worse than everything that's left. So yeah. I gotta pull up my list again. Alright. So next up, where did it go? Crash Entranced. I think very highly of this game, actually. I think this is a straight improvement over Huge Adventure in almost every way. The level design is a lot better. There's a lot less of like leaps of faith and trial of error. It's still very faithful to the Crash series as a whole. Like, it draws a lot of inspiration from Crash 2 and Crash 3, and it draws a little bit from Wrath of Cortex as well. But overall, it really does just feel like Huge Adventure, but better. It does have some issues, the biggest one being that it is more abundant on vehicles than Huge Adventure is. But really, as far as things go, I don't have too much to complain about this game. One praise I do really give to it is that it should try to shake up the formula of the Crash series while it still remained faithful. Use the Warp Room theme and like set layout. It had the like level by level setup. You had to get crystals, break boxes, and all that. But it's still trying to mix things up a little bit. The power-ups were different. You started with double jump and body slam. You could get a super slide after the first boss. You got like a rocket jump after the second boss. Death Tornado Spin and running shoes were still power-ups. Colored gems were replaced in favor of gem shards, where each level theme had like a specific colored gem shard, and to actually get the colored gem, you had to collect all the shards, and then it unlocks a post-game level, which I thought was really cool. So basically, it tried to mix up the Crash formula, but also stayed faithful, which I really respect. It is a bit more of a different experience compared to like something like Huge Adventure or Wrath of Cortex, where it was a lot of the same. Honestly, the biggest complaint I would probably have for this game is that the final boss with Entropy is like super, super draining because it's so long and it's actually kind of hard. It's about probably my only complaint. Also, Entropy is the boss. Cortex isn't even in this game. So like they really did try to mix up the formula a lot, which I respect. Alright. I feel like I'm going to upset a select few people in the chat with this. Crash 1. And I would say it might upset a few people because it's this low. And I used to be put a lot more praise on Crash 1. There is a lot about Crash 1 that I adore. And there's a lot about Crash 1 that I think no other game in the series really does. Like, Crash 1's atmosphere and environment is fantastic. Just the whole, like, my favorite thing that I always love about Crash 1 is that if you look at the progression of level to level, it tells the story of like Crash's journey, where like he starts on Insanity Beach, He goes through like the islands, he travels to all these places, and then he gets to the end, he fights Cortex, and you can make a story out of each level. Like, that's something that gets lost in later games about like with the warp room system. But like, this is the atmosphere of this game is really good, like the ambience, like the setting. I really like the level design of this game. Like, it feels a lot more focused on like the tricky platforming of, you know, like a Mario game or like a 2D Mario game, because the movement is just so much more restricted compared to later Crash games, because Crash only has run, jump, spin. And like, I actually find a lot of the difficulty of this game to be a welcome challenge, because I'm the kind of person who likes challenging games. And while Crash 1 is hard, it's not impossibly hard. It's kind of BS in a couple spots, but it's not impossibly difficult. But yeah, there's so much good things that Crash 1 does. I think the biggest thing that holds this game back is just how archaic a lot of its mechanics are. Like, not having access to analog, not having like a proper saving system, the fact that you have to finish levels without dying to get gems because checkpoints don't save your crate count. That really is the biggest problem with Crash 1, is just like, it really has not aged well. And it's like one of the only Crash games that I can honestly say did not age well. And honestly, that's really the only thing that holds it back. Like, this game is fantastic in so many different ways, but it's just held back by like mechanical setbacks. Like, otherwise I would rank it so much higher. Like, if it weren't for all of the like issues the game has and how it was built, this would probably be in the running for best Crash game. Like, it really is just that good, aside from the select few things about it that are really bad. But overall, it's still like an utterly fantastic Crash game. Like, it really is super good. Alright, and then closing out great is Crash 3. So, I mean, I don't really know what to say about Crash 3. Like, it took the good parts about Crash 2 and mostly kept them intact. Introduced a lot of variance in gameplay with the vehicles, and I don't think like the vehicles are as intrusive as they are in something like Entranced or Wrath of Cortex. There's definitely more of them that I would... There's more than... There's more vehicles than I wish there was. Like, half the game is vehicles, which kind of sucks. But overall, a lot of the vehicles are fun. Like, I think, like, the motorcycle's pretty fun. Actually, that might be it. That was gonna go into my next point of like things that I think holds this game back. Is like, the vehicles are not inherently bad, but they're very hit or miss. Like, motorcycle's fun. Underwater, like the submarine underwater is fun. The Tiger is like kind of half and half. Like, if Purah functions, Purah is really fun. The problem is that when you're going like super fast and trying to break everything, Purah doesn't entirely function. I think that's the biggest problem with this game, is that like it was so blatantly rushed in a lot of its development that at some points it really just doesn't function. And I think that's the only thing that really holds Crash 3 back, is that sometimes you're just like, well, that should have worked, and then it didn't. You notice this more when you're like a speedrunner and you're playing on a clock. Like, casually, you probably won't notice these issues, but you'll notice, like, yeah, you know, like, the game frequently drops inputs because it's just not optimized properly. A lot of the times you'll like run over a crate in a vehicle and it just won't break. In the plane levels, sometimes the bullets just do not register and like things don't get hit. There is a crash in level 15 in Doubleheader that is like, it's just random. Like, you might just get it. The game lags in a lot of spots. Like, it really is like, if it weren't for those problems, it probably would be better than Crash 2. But it's just like, mechanically the game just doesn't always function, and that's like its biggest setback. And then just like, the vehicles in and of themselves aren't a problem. Like, I feel like the baseline idea for all the vehicles are all really good. It's just that when they don't function properly, it becomes really annoying. And I think that's really just Crash 3's biggest issue, is that it doesn't work the way it was supposed to. If it did, it would be phenomenal. Like, and that's why it's like, this is the top of great. Like, it's just like barely off of being among the best to me, I guess. So yeah. Alright. So we got 5 more games, and they are the best, in my opinion. I move shit. Okay. Alright. So let's start with the bottom of the best. And I want to clarify, ranking these 5 was really difficult, and sometimes I still second guess myself. All right. Also, I want to clarify again, because I said this at the beginning of the video. When I say the best, I don't mean objectively the best. This is ultimately my list of my favorite Crash games, like least favorite to favorite. So what I think is my favorite Crash game, so in my head the best Crash game, is like not gonna be what everybody else thinks. Like, I already know that like people are not gonna agree with me on this. So yeah. So let's start out with CTR. Prior to Nitro Fueled, I firmly believe that CTR was the greatest kart racer of all time. And Nitro Fueled notwithstanding, I still think that. Like, I really, really love this game. It takes all of the good things about like Mario Kart and just makes them better. Like, it's really, really deep in its mechanics. It's incredibly fast-paced. It has a fantastic like adventure mode. Like, so its single player campaign is really, really good. Like, I really have so few complaints about CTR, and like they all have to do with the fact that it was just held back by the PS1. Like, just like the whole, like, you can't play Oxide Station in multiplayer. Oxide is not a playable character. That's not stuff they willingly did. That's stuff they had to do because of, like, hardware limitations. Like, but otherwise, like, I think this game just trounces Mario Kart in every way. It's a lot crisper in terms of mechanics and movement and just how it feels. It's faster. The sound design is fantastic. The track design is fantastic. Like, I have so few complaints about this game. I'm actually kind of shocked that it's at the bottom of this tier of like the best, which I think kind of just says how I feel about the rest of the games. All right, so number 4, Crash 2. There was a point in time where I considered this my favorite game of all time. That obviously is not the case anymore, but it still is up there. The interesting thing about Crash 2 is that it's interesting where it's like Crash 1 and Crash 3, I think what helps them and also hurts them is that they have really high highs and really low lows. Like, when I was talking about Crash 1 and Crash 3, like, I would mention what I really liked about the games, but then I would also mention what I really didn't like about the games. The thing that I think makes Crash 2 good, or at least one of the things that makes it good, is that it is just consistently good across the board. Like, it doesn't have the peaks that Crash 1 and Crash 3 have, but it also doesn't have, like, the valleys or, like, the lows of it. Like, there's nothing in Crash 2 that I consider to be really bad. And from a level design perspective, like, I do kind of agree with you, Skylar, on like the level design of Crash 2 is kind of flat, especially when you compare it to something like Crash 1. Crash 1, I think, has really interesting level design in like the baseline levels, but I think when you go into like the 100% factor of Crash 2, when you have like all these extra like offshoots, it completely trounces like every other Crash game. Like, the secrets in this game are incredible. Like, none of them are overly cryptic aside from like 2 of them. Like, I guess like the dig in it plant secret exit is like really cryptic as to figure it out. A lot of people complain about the blue gem being really cryptic, but like, I never had an issue with that, because if you just like get the regular gem and then go back in and it tells you X out of 0 boxes. Like, I think like the thing with Crash 2 is kind of just a case of the whole package. Like, if you focus in on any one specific aspect of Crash 2, so if you look at like just the level design, or like just the platforming, or like just the difficulty, or just the music, like, Okay, actually, no, the music's pretty good. When you look at it like as like just single aspects of each level, like it doesn't seem to stand out. But when you put it all together, you kind of realize it all just flows really well, and there isn't really anything that stands out as really bad. As far as soundtrack goes, I think it has the best soundtrack of the original 3 games, and one of the best soundtracks in the series. I won't say it's the absolute best soundtrack in the series, but it is up there. And with the case of Crash 2, it's definitely like a package deal. Like the whole thing just wraps up really nicely into this game that just stands out really well. Like there's just something special about Crash 2 when you look at it entirely. And the funny thing is, like, speedrunning it for 5 years, which I've done now, both like raised my opinion of it and lowered my opinion of it. Because like when you are aware of like all the potential in speed tech that this game has, it's really cool. And then you play it and you realize that it doesn't work 70% of the time, and that kind of lowers your opinion of it. So it kind of just puts it back exactly where it was. But yeah. All right. So number 3, and I'm going to go really in-depth on this, because it's the Insane Trilogy. So, I was originally going to rate this as 3 separate games, because I think they deserve to be rated as 3 separate games. The reason I didn't is because, 1, I didn't really feel like making my own chart. I just found one that was on tiermaker.com. And 2, when I ended up ranking every game in the series, all 3 of the NST games ended up right next to each other. So, like, I could just rate them as one and then tell you specifically how I feel about them as their own thing. So, as far as a remake goes, NST is very, very good. I think in more cases, it does improve on the original games than it doesn't. It definitely has its issues. Like, some of the hitboxes are really jank. Some things are more broken than they were in like the past, but overall, like, I think they really knocked it out with this remake. The movement feels really crisp. It's a lot less floaty than the old games, which is good or bad depending on how you feel about the old physics of like the PS1 games. The game is fucking gorgeous. Like, it is beautiful to look at. And like, graphics should never be like the primary selling point of the game, but they definitely help a lot, and this game is just beautiful. And then like, really just it improves on like the originals in a lot of places. Like, it feels like in terms of like actually like movement and like dropped inputs and stuff, like it functions better, which makes sense because it's like it's an 8th generation game as opposed to a 5th generation game. But like mechanically, I just feel like it functions more often. Yes, you can play as Coco. That is a huge factor of it. So if I were to rate them all from, like, if I were to rate the 3 games separately, it's still like really hard to rate them. Like the one thing I can say is that 1 and 2 are really close to tied, and I think 3 is the best of them. So NST Crash 2, I think ultimately where it suffers is that it improves less than Crash 1 and 3 did, and that's mostly because Crash 2 didn't really have a lot of ways to go up. The introduction of relics was a really good thing they did, which gave the game a lot of replay value. I think the whole thing with Crash 2 being a package deal kind of gets a little lost in NST Crash 2, where like the like higher graphics kind of like show off where a lot of like the aesthetic of Crash 2 was kind of bland compared to Crash 1 and 3. The music is a straight downgrade, honestly. Like the music in NST Crash 2 is not bad. It's just not nearly as good as the original. But other than that, there isn't really anything NST 2 does wrong. It's just so much that like it doesn't really improve Crash 2 as much as NST improves Crash 1 and Crash 3. Crash 1, I think, is phenomenally like upgraded. Like all of the archaic problems that Crash 1 has in terms of like, you know, like save mechanics, checkpoint mechanics, all of that is like completely fixed. It functions properly in that regard. The level design is still fantastic. I think aesthetically the game is a lot better. Like, it doesn't have like that dark, like dank atmosphere that Crash, like the original Crash one has, which is kind of tragic. But it is a lot brighter and more colorful words. It's a lot more colorful, which I think in the context of the trilogy as a whole makes it fit in a lot better. The music was also, like, the style of the music was changed to reflect that, and I think it fits the game really well. You thought NST was my favorite game ever? Skylar, I thought you knew that my favorite game ever is Kingdom Hearts 1. But yeah, really, I think the only thing that holds Crash 1 NST back is, like, just that even though they fix a lot of the archaic problems that Crash 1 had, it still has the issue of it's a lot simpler of a game than Crash 2 and Crash 3, which is like, if you really appreciate Crash 1's level design, like, it's not, like, that's not too bad. But I feel like Crash 1 is more likely to get stale compared to Crash 2 and Crash 3, just because there's so much less that you can do with Crash 1. But overall, like, Crash 1 is, like, on NSC is a straight improvement over the original. Alright, I'm gonna change this just because I'm getting tired of this. Alright, 15 minutes I guess is good. So yeah. And then Crash 3 again, I think is a straight improvement over the original. Again, it just fixes a lot of the functionality of Crash 3. The vehicles, I think, on a whole, are a lot better than they were in the original, which a lot of people don't seem to agree with me on, because they just say, like, oh, look at the jet ski, it's so bad. And, like, yeah, the jet ski is not great. The jet ski in the original Crash 3 is a lot better, but I also don't think the jet ski is awful. I think the only vehicle in Crash 3 that is legitimately terrible is the underwater submarine, which is ironic because that was the best vehicle in the original. The rest of them are serviceable, and I think honestly improve over the originals. Like, Pearl works better in NST. The plane works better in NST. The actual underwater movement itself, like when you're not on the submarine, is way better in NST. The motorcycle is hit or miss. Like, the motorcycle on console is probably worse than it is on PS1. The motorcycle on PC, I think, is completely fine. Like, the other thing about NST is that it puts the entire trilogy in a nice singular package. Yeah, that's why I didn't want to rate them as one thing, just because I thought it was unfair to rate 3 games as one. But ultimately, they were all right next to each other, so I just put them all together as one. But I'm basically saying that if I were to rate them separately, it would be from bottom to top, it would be 2, 1, 3. Or 1, 2, 3. Like, 1 and 2 are pretty close to tied. But probably 2, 1, 3. Yeah, like, I just think NST 3 improves on the original in so many ways. And I'm also kind of biased just because, from a speedrun perspective, it is by far the best one, in my opinion. Just, it has so much movement mechanics, so much tricks, so many glitches. Like, it's just such a fantastic run, and the game just has so much potential. Like, yeah. So that's all I have to say on that. Alright, number 2, which by extension is going to give away number 1. If any of you guys saw my favorite video games of all time ranking that I put out at the beginning of January, this won't shock you because there is a Crash game on that list. Actually, there's 2 Crash games on that list, and one of them is ranked higher than the other. So my second favorite Crash game of all time is CTR Nitro Fueled. So, when I mentioned that CTR before Nitro Fueled was, in my opinion, the greatest kart racer of all time. And I think that now that CTR Nitro Fueled is the greatest kart racer of all time. Like, sure, speedrun-wise, this game has issues. And online is not perfect. Like, there's definitely a lot of issues with the online. But casually, there is so little that I think this game does wrong. Like, it takes everything that's great about CTR and really, in a lot of ways, just makes it better. Like, there's more content. There's so much more content. And, like, yeah, the whole, like, microtransaction thing kind of sucks, but you can play the game without spending an extra dime on it at all. Like, you might have to grind a little more, which sucks, but it's just how it is. I don't think that significantly detracts from the experience of the game. The online, when it actually works, is really fun. Yeah, OG CTR is really hard to top, but the fact that it's like... yeah, it really does just top OG, which is impressive. All of the Nitro Car tracks are, like, significantly, like, improved. Like, the Nitro Car tracks, in a lot of ways, are probably, like, more fun than the CTR tracks. They just had to be in an engine that actually accommodated them. But, like, really, it's just such a straight upgrade on, like, CTR in almost every way. And, like, there's so much content and so much love put into this game that you can tell that they just tried so hard to just give the franchise as a whole just like this nice love letter, and I really think they pulled it off. Like, I really was like apprehensive about this game when it was coming out. I was like, how do you top CTR? And then they just did. Like, I have so few complaints about this game, even though like I got burned out on it like months ago and haven't played it in a long time. It's not because I was sick of the game or like I hated it. It was so fun. Like, I have no complaints about CTR really. All right. So yeah, I figured this was going to be a hot take for a lot of people, but yes, my favorite Crash game is Crash Twinsanity. Like, and again, I will clarify for a third time, this is not my opinion on the best Crash games. This is an opinion on my favorite Crash games. I guess the best is a little misleading there. And yes, I do realize this is a very, very hot take. But yes, my favorite Crash game is Crash Twinsanity. Speedrun aside, because the speedrun of this game is fucking fantastic, I think what I respect about Crash Twinsanity is that this game is like probably about 30-40% finished, and it still managed to come out as good as it did. Like, the platforming is really fun. All of the gameplay shifts in general I find to be really fun. Like, there's maybe like a handful of sections of the game that I really don't think are that enjoyable. And even then, like, not enjoyable isn't to the degree of like this or like even like this. Like, it's still fun. Like, I can't really think of a part of this game that I don't enjoy. The soundtrack is really great. I'll admit it is an acquired taste. If you're not big on acapella, then you'll probably be turned off by the soundtrack that we're listening to right now. I like that it attempted to be open world. Like, it still was linear, like, admittedly. I'm not going to pretend this was like some wide, expansive open world Super Mario Odyssey, Jack and Daxter style open world game, but it did make the Crash universe feel like a seamless world that you could just traverse, and I respect that. The game's humor is top-notch. It was the first real attempt for Crash to have, like, a strong story, and while it kind of just, like, is sort of filled with plot holes just because the game's development got rushed so much, I respect that. The characterization was a lot better. This is the game that made Cortex an interesting character to me. Like, Cortex in, like, any of these older games is really, to me, bland, in that, like, his biggest personality trait is that he's the bad guy. This, like, for as much as this is a Crash game, this is also Cortex's game. Like, this is what made him such a likable character to me. Like, I think with Twins, it's another case of, like, it's like Crash 2, where it's like, you have to look at the whole package, except you really, really have to look at the whole package. If you look at just the gameplay, or, like, just the music, or just the humor, or just the story, you're gonna be like, how can this be that good? But when you put it all together, it just wraps up so nicely. Like, maybe it's because I'm also just a fan of, like, when things are a bit more story-driven, or when things are a bit more open and less linear. Like, I don't know. I just really, really like Crash Twinsanity. And, like, the funny thing is that like me speedrunning it definitely plays a part in me liking it as much as I do, but I think the biggest thing is that as I was speedrunning it, I wasn't growing fond of it because I was speedrunning it. Just like learning the game reminded me how much I just adore this game's design as a whole. I firmly believe that Crash Twinsanity is the direction that the franchise should have gone, and the fact that every game that came out after Twinsanity kind of did the thing where like they saw what worked in Twins but didn't understand why it worked and just like kind of like attempted to emulate it but really didn't. I think that's really where the series started to go downhill. Like, I don't know, like I firmly understand that Twinsanity as number one is the hottest of hot takes, but I do really think that this is where Crash's potential was at its peak. It wasn't lived up to it, like, but I think that there's so much good in this game, despite the fact that it's not even finished. That like I don't know, I love it so much. I cannot put it lower than any other game on this list, at least not right now. Like if I was doing an objective ranking of like how I think each game is good, how good game each game is like objectively, it wouldn't be number one. But because this is how I enjoy every Crash game, like this is my personal list, I have to put it number one. I fucking adored Crash Twinsanity. I really do. But yeah. So that's the entire list. That's 20 games. 21 if you count CNK as its own thing. Like let's just get that the fuck out of there. Okay, we'll just keep it there, I guess. So yeah. Quick recap. Bottom, Crash Boom Bang, Mind Over Mutant DS, Titans DS. Mediocre, Titans and Mom are effectively tied. Tag Team Racing, Bash, and then Alright, both versions of CNK are effectively tied. Purple, Titans DS, could have been higher if I had been able to play more of it. Huge Adventure, and then the good Crash games, but not like absolutely fantastic, would be Wrath of Cortex, Entrance, Crash 1, Crash 3, and then the best is CTR, Crash 2, Insane Trilogy. Separated into 3 games, it would be from bottom to top, would be 2, 1, 3. Nitro Fueled, and then my favorite is Crash Twinsanity. Yeah, that was really long. I went into a lot more detail than I was planning. But yeah, hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you guys want me to do this for anything else, tell me. It doesn't even have to be Crash related. It can be another game series. It could be like a film series, a TV show series, like something like that. Like it doesn't have to be games. I really like ranking things like this and talking about how I feel about them. Kingdom Hearts is on the table. Smash is like 5 games. Let's be real. Okay, I'll rank the Smash games for you right now. Smash for Wii U, Smash for 3DS, Brawl Ultimate Melee. Sly, I could do it for Star Wars. I did it on Twitter a few weeks ago, but I could do it for Star Wars. Do this for Sly games. Sly is only 4 games, so I'll just tell you now. 4, 3, 2, 1, or 4, 3, 1, 2 rather. I think 2 is probably overall my favorite. But yeah. I think that's all I really have to say on it, but yeah, like, if you guys want me to do more tier lists like this, I will. I enjoy it. It's fun. It was fun to talk about this. It was fun to finally get my thoughts on the Crash series out like that, because I've been sitting on this for a few years, actually. So yeah. You prefer Ultimate to Melee because you're a casual. I actually think Melee is a better casual game. Like, not, like, in terms of, like, one-on-one, but, like, Melee has a lot better of a single-player experience to me. And I think its free-for-all is pretty fun, too. Like, I think the best free-for-all is probably Brawls, but... Oh, I'll definitely do Pokemon games. Pokemon games I have a lot that I like to say. I might want to revisit some of them before I do, though. But yeah. I've got some other ideas of tier lists I want to do, but I definitely think it was good to start with Crash, because this is just, like, such a huge cornerstone of, like, people who do follow me, because I'm a Crash speedrunner. Harry Potter could work. Alright, but yeah. It is almost 1 a.m. because this was really long. So yeah, I'm gonna head to bed. Probably won't stream tomorrow. I'll try to stream Thursday. And yeah, so see you guys later.